All right, so we are back with Peanut Gallery booking a New Japan show like WWE. It was my responsibility to do the opposite. And unlike Peanut Gallery, I'm going to give a lot more of a clarification about how this would be booked, because when you're thinking about a pay-per-view, it's not just the pay-per-view booking, it's how you get to that point.
Right.
And with New Japan,
I think I was a little flustered.
Yes, you definitely were, because that's something that that a lot of people really don't take into consideration. Like, not where you are, but how you get there. And with New Japan, it's all about tours. And they would do a lot of tag team matches to promote these, to build these up slowly. And what was challenging for me was, how do I construct serious top contenders that will replace the people later, because New Japan is always thinking 5 steps ahead.
Right.
Where there's always a new challenger. It's a very rare occasion where you see a rematch of a pay-per-view title match next month. It's very rare. So I had to think about how I would construct the next possible contender for the world titles without incorporating current champions, because New Japan doesn't do that anymore.
Right.
And also, constructing these tag team matches without the benefit of having faction warfare was, I think, actually a lot easier, but that is something incorporated in Japan.
Because I had the challenge of
taking that out.
Disincorporating the factionality of it. I had to see each person as an individual.
And the tag teams as a duo, not just a part of a faction.
Right.
So what I did was basically a very similar way of how New Japan booked their previous pay-per-view lineup that we discussed earlier, which you can watch on this channel. It hasn't been taken down.
All right, so this is going to be a two-parter.
Yes, it's a 2-night. So it was basically the same thing with Summer Struggle in Nagoya and Wrestle Grand Slam. Even though they're not the same tour or the same thing, they're too close for them not to be related.
And one of the rules for WWE that was specific to it was, unless they were taking the place of the, quote, Young Lions,
I cannot use NXT.
NXT was not incorporated into this.
Which I thought was going to be more of a crutch than it was, because I actually constructed matches to where I didn't need that.
Right.
So let's start off with our first match, because this will tie into night 2, which we'll get into later. 6-woman tag, really easy. Like, Charlotte and Rhea Ripley, obvious rivalry, and then you have a faction here, with Eva Marie and Doudrop, and then with the tag team champions, which actually made that really easy, because all of them are pseudo, not really babyface or heels too. So actually, this one was
that'd be a great first match,
and a really easy, really good first match to book. Exactly. The next one, this one wrote itself.
Right.
Roman Reigns and the Usos taking on John Cena, Dominic, and Rey Mysterio. They're all going to be in matches the next night. All of them are in rivalries. It was just obvious. And it's like, you just got to think about these as factions. Super easy. The next one I thought actually was constructed, and I could definitely see this as a match. Because Morrison has definitely been in with the New Day. And then with the incorporation of MVP and Bobby Lashley, with Goldberg, and then with Kofi, so you all have this whole rivalry together.
Right.
It actually was not as challenging as I expected it to be.
Okay.
In my final 6-man tag, it's AJ Styles, Omos, Veer, and Jinder Mahal taking on the Viking Raiders, Drew McIntyre, and Riddle. A really easy match. Like, this one was actually fairly easy, because pretty much everybody except for Veer and Riddle are in matches later.
Right.
Which, once again, you establish these rivalries. You continue them without devaluing, like, that structure.
Right.
So you'd have AJ Styles versus Drew McIntyre or Riddle. Instead of one of the Viking Raiders, you book that into a way where it's to, like, the big climax of the match. Once again, we didn't do winners or losers, because that would just add a whole other can of worms in there, which we weren't going to get into.
Right.
Our first special singles, I really couldn't put these in a tag match. I even tried. Edge versus Seth Rollins. It's the obvious one, and especially with it being that special singles, once again, you establish on whoever wins this is the clear number 1 contender for the Universal Champion after the match on night 2.
Right.
So, really easy. It was like written in stone.
Yeah.
And then finally, the main event for night 1 was going to be Bianca Belair defending the SmackDown Women's Champion against Sasha Banks. This is not devaluing them because this is the main event for night number 1, just like it was before. And I had to think of where each match was going to be very strategically.
Yeah.
Because if you did one of the tag title matches, which we'll get into here soon, on here we wouldn't have those mixed or those multi-person tags,
Right.
which would have really dampened my style there. But also make sure that this rivalry, where this match was a very good match, is still incorporated somewhere, which is why it's the main event for night number 1.
Right.
So then we get to night number 2, which is basically the blow-off for pretty much all of these rivalries. And that's how I booked it, with the tour that came previously, and then finally with night 1 in the back door. Mm-hmm. It's the obvious choice. This one would be the opening match. They would always start with junior tags where the workhorses are going to be in there,
right,
or a rivalry that had a lot of emotion behind it. So you have family, Usos defending the SmackDown Tag Team Champions against Rey and Dominic Mysterio. Really easy. The second one was going to be more of the heavy hitter match, is what New Japan generally does, with more heavy hitters.
And they usually put the tag team champion. They usually put the tag team matches first.
Well,
on the card.
I did this one as well, just because they do rank it on the importance of the rivalry.
Okay.
So where we had the rematch from at Wrestle Grand Slam between the Techers and LIJ. This one, just because the rivalry's been there for a while, I wanted to make sure that we got the tag team matches there. And then also, once again, you have 4 heavy hitters here,
right?
At least there. And that's kind of why I chose that one. And also the other matches that I have here in a minute take precedence of the importance and significance of these against those.
Right.
So this one was obviously going to be my third, or my fourth, which is Charlotte Flair, Nikki Ash defending the title, and then Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's Champion. Because of how the rivalry's been going, the length of at least a rivalry between Flair and Ripley, Nikki Ash is the current champion. It would not be a good thing to have that. And also, I kind of viewed this as the junior heavyweight champion. So you would put this match here for that. It's going to be a really, really good match. So don't miss it. But we're waiting for the big ones.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I hate to do that. I hate to say that, but that's kind of what you get, you know? So with this one, because this one, I'm trying to build the next contender for the WWE champion.
Okay.
And how you do that is booking them in 6-mans like we did the night previous, an entire tour to really establish this absolute grudge match where you have 6-mans where they're not going to work as hard, but still pull off really good matches.
Right.
You see these two at that point as the next logical contender for the title. I made this one as well just because of how intense it is, a no disqualification match. Now, in WWE world, that's not a big thing, but they're using weapons.
Right.
It's very personal because they're destroying each other's property. They're taking away swords that have the Loch Ness Monster incorporated in it.
Jesus Christ.
Obviously, this could not be just a one-on-one. This one had to be more than that. So whoever won, it's going to be a hard-fought match. People are going to view you as the next contender, no matter what. And also the placement for the previous match between Drew McIntyre and Jinder Mahal was very strategic in that way as well, because they generally do those larger singles matches third to last or second to last match.
Right. Before the world title.
Yes, before the world titles. So obviously the first one, just because it was right after you already have the next obvious contender for the WWE Champion match, might as well have the WWE Champion on the line second to last.
Right.
With Bobby Lashley versus Goldberg. And then whoever wins that match, it doesn't even matter if it's Jinder Mahal winning the match, he would be fine a good victory. You could see Lashley or Goldberg defending the title against Jinder Mahal. That just makes sense because he was there. So that's why this one is right after.
Right.
And that's why I chose it. And finally, obviously, Roman Reigns, John Cena for the Universal Champion. It's the clear choice.
Right.
And then whoever won the Edge Rollins would be the next contender, because any combination of those 4 guys, you're going to have a great match.
Right.
So that was kind of my way of doing that. Peanut Gallery, with what was said, and I sent you the card, what would you have done differently? Did you like how I constructed it? What would you do differently?
Yeah, so I think the hardest thing for me is a triple threat match, just because New Japan isn't very well known for those. Now, of course, you had to make that exception just because of the way that the rivalry has been going.
Yes.
But I still have my doubts on whether or not a triple threat match would be a good idea, because it's not their style.
Right.
And
it was a really hard match to book, but
you had to
given the
make a
situation-
decision based, if you had to do a singles match, you'd have to make a choice.
Right.
And that's not always easy to make
And
because of the way that it's been going.
And if I made the special singles match between Flair and Ripley, I would have put that as the main event for night 1, which
Right.
would have taken out that 6-woman tag at the beginning of the show,
Right.
which would have established a really good pace for the rest of the card.
Right.
So it wasn't the most ideal situation, but given how the rivalry at least was going at the time, and that was one of the criterion that you and I both agreed on,
Right. We
was
had to use
current
current
rivalries to construct the card.
So that's why the cards came out the way that they did, was because we had to construct.
Now, could I have incorporated?
on
Now, could I have
rivalries.
incorporated a Nikki Ash into the 6-woman tag, or added 2 more to make it an 8-woman tag?
No, I don't think so. Because what side
Right,
is
exactly,
Nikki Ash
and that's
taking?
and I actually gave that. I actually put that into consideration.
Right.
Who would I put in there? What would I have done at that point?
Right.
So that's why I only made it that general 6-woman tag.
I think the other difficult thing too was that you only had 6 slots or 5 or 6 slots, because New Japan does not book 8, 9, 10 10-match slots unless
Right.
it's like Wrestle Kingdom.
Right.
Obviously, this is not Wrestle Kingdom.
Right. And well, now it was easier because I did have the double night, but they always do, like, night number 1 has a lot of matches that incorporate into night number 2.
Right.
So I had to make sure that there was a good balancing act. And, not every person was supposed to be there. I wasn't going to put the women's tag team champions on the line unless it was only them. And that
Right.
would have taken away from other ones. And I'm sorry, building up Drew or Jinder for the next logical contender was more important than having the women's tag.
Right.
But that also continues that rivalry.
Right.
So, and once again, you always have to keep in mind of the consideration of the different rivalries and the different people in there.
Right.
To at least fill out that card. So really, what the women's, what Natalya, Tamina, and all of them, they basically took the spot of your Yuji Nagatas, or your Tomoaki Homas, or your Togi Makabes, or
Right.
even the 6-man tags.
Right.
Where they may not be on night number 2, but they're, I hate to say this, but they're place filler, just like John Morrison, Riddle,
Right.
Veer. They're placeholders for
Exactly.
what to come to next. So I had to kind of put them into that consideration when I was booking this card.
Right. So, as far as the future goes, obviously the special singles matches.
Now, here's my thing, and I was actually going to talk to you about that. Do you believe that how I booked Drew McIntyre and Jinder Mahal, do you think that would have accomplished what my action was? Making this a special singles on night number 2, third match before the main event. Do you think that would have made that successful? Do you think that either one of these two, no matter who won, they're the next logical contender?
And then they would come out after the match and issue the challenge.
Right, or attack them, hold the title up, clear the next contender where it would make sense. Like with Evil, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, Evil's not a contender. They need to stop doing that. But the thing is, he beat Ishii night 1.
Right.
He came out and attacked Shingo, and now he has the title match. That's the same principle here.
Right.
You want to build up that person by winning a big, important match, and then have them be the clear indication of the next person.
Exactly.
So that's why I booked it the way I did. With Lashley Goldberg, obviously that's the current rivalry. I would not have chosen Goldberg in this spot.
Right, but you have to get through it, and afterwards you have the next clear contender.
Right, and the same thing with Cena Reigns. I didn't want to put Cena in this position, but I had to because who else is there? And then Reigns obviously has this. Now, this one would have been a little bit easier for me personally. If Cena and Reigns weren't obviously in a rivalry, I would have put Finn Balor in that.
Right.
In that spot.
Right.
But with Lashley, maybe Kofi Kingston I would have put in this position, but once again, it wouldn't have had that additional oomph, and obviously Goldberg is the next contender.
Right.
So
just because that's the way that their current rivalries are.
Right.
So we had to work within those parameters of having those rivalries done. So you want to run down the card really quick like I did last time?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is for night number 1. The first match, Flair, Natalya, Tamina taking on Ripley, Doudrop, and Eva Marie. You have Roman Reigns and the Usos taking on John Cena and the Mysterios. You have Bobby Lashley, MVP, and John Morrison taking on Goldberg and New Day. You have the Viking Raiders, Drew McIntyre and Riddle taking on AJ Styles, Omos, Veer, and Jinder Mahal. You have Edge versus Seth Rollins in that special singles. And then you have the main event for night 1, which is Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's Champion.
All right.
For night number 2, you have the Usos versus the Mysterios for the Tag Team Champions, or the SmackDown. You have the Viking Raiders taking on AJ Styles and Omos for the Raw Tag Team Champions. You have the triple threat between Flair, Nikki Ash, and Ripley for the Raw Women's Champion. You have Jinder Mahal and Drew McIntyre in the no disqualification match. You have Bobby Lashley versus Goldberg for the WWE Champion. And finally, you have Roman Reigns versus John Cena for the Universal Champion.
All right. So, through this exercise, what did we, what did you?
Yeah, we want to hear you in the comments down below. What do you think?
Right.
What would you have chosen differently with mine or Peanut Gallery's card? What is going on next week?
I have not a freaking idea, because I don't think there's a pay-per-view next week.
I don't believe so. I'll double check, but I do not believe there's a pay-per-view next week. So we'll obviously update you on that. We might do something kind of similar to this, maybe.
Yeah, or we do a fun exercise and what-if scenario.
Right, a what-ifs, or maybe the future of certain really superstars, what's been going on in the wrestling world, kind of an update, because there's been a lot going on. And obviously, if you enjoyed the video, remember to like the video or the stream, subscribe to the channel, follow the channel wherever you're listening or watching this on. Follow us on all of our social medias, become a patron. It's down, linked with the link tree. Just, go down there and check it all out. And do you have any other announcements regarding anything else?
I do not.
Okay, well, as always, be
majestic.